Todd McShay's first mock draft of NFL draft season is out. What did he get right? What did he get wrong? What should we expect to change in mock draft 2.0? From now until April, Andrew Wilbar, Fantasy Football and NFL Draft will be your home for everything related to the NFL Draft. Whether it is breaking down Mel and Todd's biggest mistakes, or every now and then maybe something that they get right in their mock drafts, or me giving you my top prospect rankings and mock drafts, you will not want to go anywhere for these next few months. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you have not already. We're going to have a blast, so stay tuned. We're going to get into it today with some of the biggest takeaways from Todd McShay's mock draft 1.0. Now, a lot of people have a lot of different feelings on Mel Kiper, Todd McShay. For the most part, I do like them. I believe they're the two best draft experts out there, at least when you're talking about the main stations, sports stations. I do like their mock drafts for the most part. There's always a few head scratchers in them, but those are the things that we're going to get into today. I did write a reaction article at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. The link will be in the description. You can go and check that out. I encourage you to do so. But we'll begin at the top where you can't really screw it up. Trevor Lawrence is going number 1 overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jets won a couple games towards the end of the season, and that knocked them out of the contention for the number 1 overall pick. Some Jets fans still want to go the route of a quarterback. In this mock draft, Todd McShay is giving them Penei Sewell, who is currently my number 1 prospect in this draft. I just think he is the best offensive tackle probably that I've ever seen come out, but definitely the best that's come out in the last 5 to 7 years for sure. He's just a complete player, just so dominant as a run blocker at 6'4", 230 pounds or whatever he is, 6'5", 6'6", 330 pounds, excuse me. I mean, he moves so well, such great mobility, good lower body strength. He only gave up, 1 sack back in 2019. I mean, he's literally played flawless. I mean, this would be a really interesting pick for the Jets because they did draft Mekhi Becton last year. He looks to be the answer at left tackle, so you'd have to decide whether you move him to right tackle or play Sewell at right tackle. Now, you would have 2 really good bookends, but I'm not sure that this is the way the Jets are actually going to go. And Todd McShay mentioned in this mock, he thinks that the Jets are going to trade down. I believe that's the case. Of course, he did not project trades in this mock draft, but I do think the Jets are going to trade down. If the draft were today, I believe they stick with Sam Darnold, and they're going to try to build around him. Because if you look at, maybe you take Justin Fields there after he had, or Zach Wilson, nothing is a sure thing. Sam Darnold has shown enough, in my opinion, to prove to whoever the next head coach is that he is a franchise quarterback if you put some things around him. I believe Sam Darnold is the answer for the New York Jets at the quarterback position, but he was sacked 45 times last year, which was the most in the NFL. He has no real receivers to work with. I was high on Denzel Mims last year. I still think he's going to be a really good receiver, but he was injured for part of the year. You can't trust Jamison Crowder to be a number 1 option. They need to get another receiver there, so it would make sense for the Jets to move down in this scenario, either with the Bengals at 5, who desperately need another tackle, and so they can move Jonah Williams to the right side and get a true left tackle that can protect Joe Burrow. Or maybe you see a team like the Detroit Lions or the Carolina Panthers that decide to move up for a Justin Fields or a Zach Wilson. That's going to be an intriguing storyline. Mel Kiper's talked a lot about that's going to be kind of the biggest storyline of the draft. Who's that second quarterback off the board? In Todd McShay's mock draft, he has Zach Wilson going number 4 to Atlanta. More than likely, by the time we get to April 29th, it will probably be you'll probably see quarterbacks going 1 and 2 overall. That's just the way it generally works because of the demand for quarterbacks. You have so many quarterback needy teams. But just looking at his mock overall, let's keep moving down. We'll look at number 3 real quick. I do like the Devontae Smith pick to Miami at number 3. Of course, Tua was his quarterback in college. They already have a good chemistry. It would make a whole lot of sense. Miami could use another receiver with Preston Williams and Devontae Parker having some nagging injuries. Jakeem Grant is still there, but they don't have a whole lot in terms of elite weapons. Devontae Smith would come in immediately and make a huge impact. We've seen the past couple years how younger receivers are starting to produce early on. We saw Terry McLaurin. Of course, we saw Marquise Brown coming on a little bit this year, and then we just are coming off a really good rookie class where we saw some rookies make some impacts. So I think if you're looking at Devontae Smith, he's a guy that is going to come in immediately and contribute. The thing I did not like, probably the thing I disagreed most in this entire mock, was when he gave the Dolphins another receiver with their second first round pick with, I don't know if it was like pick 18, I believe. He gave them Rashad Bateman. Todd McShay compares him to Juju Smith-Schuster a lot, and I can understand that comparison. The physicality is there, not terribly fast, but he's going to make the difficult catches. So that was not a terrible necessarily pick in terms of value, but the Dolphins don't need two receivers. Either you protect Tua with that other pick, or you go, like looking at who is available. Zaven Collins, linebacker from Tulsa, had an amazing year. Very fluid in coverage for a guy who's 260 pounds. Can play inside linebacker or outside linebacker. He brings some versatility. Joseph Asai, they could use some pass rushing help on the edge. Joseph Asai would be a really good fit for Miami as well. They could go running back. Travis Etienne was off the board in this mock, and I wouldn't take Najee Harris quite that high. So I can understand it to an extent. You want to get as much as you can around Tua, but you also have to protect Tua as well. Now, they did spend a first-round pick on Austin Jackson last year. I really like Solomon Kinley at guard. He had a nice year, but they're still very young. Maybe they could consider adding another piece through the draft. I don't know if that's the way they'll go, but the defense definitely needs some help. That's where I would have gone with that second pick. That would only make sense. But I do like the Devontae Smith pick at number 3. Number 4, this is where we see Zach Wilson go off to the Atlanta Falcons. I do think Atlanta is in the quarterback market, but I'm just curious, where do they go? At number 4, do they want to get a Micah Parsons, a guy who can really turn the tide of that defense that has been awful for several years now? And then do you come back, I'm not a fan of Kyle Trask by any stretch of the imagination. I'm almost tempted to put Desmond Ridder ahead of Trask. Trask is my number 6 quarterback currently. He doesn't have a great arm, not great mobility. I just don't see him being a great pro. I think his ceiling is almost like a Matt Ryan. So if they want a similar thing as a Matt Ryan, I'm not saying Matt Ryan hasn't been a great pro. I'm saying that is Kyle Trask's ceiling. I don't think Trask is ever going to be that top tier elite quarterback. Maybe he hits tier 2, tier 3, becomes an average quarterback, but I think there's a really good chance he just ends up being a high-end backup maybe in the league, and maybe he doesn't even do that. He could be a guy that is out of the league in 3 years. He just doesn't have an elite arm, doesn't have great mobility, and when he's under pressure, he doesn't make the best decisions. So, but, schematically, it would make some sense for Atlanta, depending on who comes in as their next head coach. If maybe a team, like in my first mock draft, I had Atlanta trading up. I did trades in mine. I had Atlanta trading up with Kansas City at the end of the first round to go up and get Kyle Trask. And then they used that their 4th overall pick on Micah Parsons, who I believe went to Philadelphia in this mock. But we'll move on with the 5th pick. This one was another shocker, Rashawn Slater. In most mock drafts, you generally see Slater coming in around, pick 15, sometimes falls to the end of the first round. He's a versatile guy. If you watch the tape against Chase Young back in 2019, that was about the best tape that any lineman could put out. He really did a good job in pass protection against Chase Young. Some people do worry about with the length. He's 6'3". His arm length is going to be huge for him at the combine. How tall is he? Those are things that are going to have to be answered. Can he play left tackle? But if you take him at number 5, you better hope that he's a left tackle, at worst a right tackle. But really, his best fit really could be on the interior, which you're not going to take an interior lineman that high. So I thought that was a little bit of a reach, but again, when he's not projecting trades, he said that, it would make sense for Cincinnati to move up to get Sewell, or Sewell could fall to them if Miami wants to take Devontae Smith, which it seems to be a match made in heaven. And you have Atlanta who could take whoever isn't taken between Fields and Wilson. You take him at 4, assuming the Jets trade back with another team that's in need of a quarterback. There's a chance that Penei Sewell, who in my opinion is the best prospect in this class, yes, even over Trevor Lawrence, he could fall to them with a 5th pick, which would be awesome for Cincinnati. But Slater, I think that's a little bit of a reach there. That was just more kind of for need. over value. But where else do you really go in that situation? I mean, you could consider Patrick Surtain possibly. That's a little bit high in my opinion for him. But, Micah Parsons could be in there as well if you're talking about best player available. But I felt like Rashawn Slater was a little bit too high. But let's move on. Of course, we saw 5 quarterbacks go in this. Of course, you had Mac Jones going to the Colts. I believe Trey Lance going to Washington. Those make some sense. I'm not quite as high on Mac Jones. I only have 4 quarterbacks right now with first-round grades. But that could always change by the time we get to April. Be sure to keep checking whenever I have a new big board out or mock draft out, and we'll break it down. We'll look at the quarterback position for sure. But another big takeaway is that there were 7 wide receivers in round 1, and this is reasonable. I think this is one of the strong spots of the mock draft as a whole. The only receiver that was in the first round that I was a little bit surprised to see was Chris Olave. I believe he had gone to the Jets in the 20s somewhere, like 25 or 26, or 25, pick 25. Olave, I believe he's going to be a good number 2 option for a team. I'm not sure if I would want to use a first-round pick on him because I think his ceiling is somewhat limited. I don't think he's going to run that great. Maybe he runs in the 4.5s. He's a good route runner, and he does create good separation. He generally displays good hands, and he's not really afraid to work the middle of the field, but I just don't know where the upside is. I would rather take my chances in round 2 or 3 on a Tylan Wallace, or around 4 even with Justin Ross, or if you want a speed guy, one of my favorite guys we'll get into as the draft process goes on, Anthony Schwartz. There's a lot of other options. This is a very deep wide receiver class. If I'm the Jets, Chris Olave, maybe if they lose Jamison Crowder, they want to replace him with a kind of a similar type of receiver, a little bit different build, but there are some similarities in their games. I wasn't a huge fan of that pick. But I could see 7 receivers going around 1. I think 5 or 6 is more likely. Elijah Moore seems to keep rising on other draft boards. He had him going to Chicago. And you have Terrace Marshall going to Green Bay. Now, that's an interesting one because we all know Green Bay needs a receiver. They've needed a receiver for a long time. But does that mean that we should give them a receiver in a mock draft, or seeing how they've ignored it for so long, why do we think they're going to change now? Is something, it's going to be an interesting storyline towards the end of the draft. Do they finally give Aaron Rodgers some help? I mean, this year he's played well with limited weapons. I mean, I know you have Aaron Jones, you have a bunch of different running backs there, A.J. Dillon, you have Devontae Adams, but they still don't have that legit number 2 receiver. They were hoping Alan Lazard would come on. He got injured. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was a guy I liked coming out of South Florida a couple years ago, and he's shown flashes. He had a huge game this past weekend in Week 17. But still, if you're looking overall, they still don't have a legit number 2 guy. Terrace Marshall would make some sense. Another big body on the outside. I do think they just need to add another weapon. They could consider, depending on who they lose on the offensive line, and may want to consider adding an offensive lineman here. Wyatt Davis went off the board a couple picks before they were on the clock. But overall, I can see 7 receivers going around 1. It's going to be a very receiver-heavy draft. That's something that we're going to be talking a lot about between now and April. And then the last thing I want to get into in this mock was the run on tackles and corners. We saw just a few corners. We saw Darian Kendrick go at the end of the first round, which I don't think he deserves to be a first-round pick. But if you look at, there was a bunch between like picks 10 and 15. There were like 3 corners that went. I believe Patrick Surtain went to Dallas, Caleb Farley went to San Francisco, and Shaun Wade went to the Chargers. I'm not sure Shaun Wade goes that high. He had a really bad year this year. I think his stock is going to fall. If you look on most other boards, he's generally going in the late first round. I think that would make a lot of sense for a team like New Orleans, like the Steelers, possibly, if the Steelers can find a way to fix some of the issues on offense, offensive line, running game, stuff like that. A major need on defense could be corner. The Steelers could be losing both Mike Hilton and Cam Sutton. I expect them to either sign one of them or bring in another slot guy. So I don't anticipate that at this moment. But if Shaun Wade is there, that would be something to consider if I were Kevin Colbert. But Shaun Wade going, in the top 15, that's still a little bit high. Caleb Farley, he opted out of the season. I'm very curious to see how players that opted out, how they're going to fare. I think that their stock overall, if you're looking at them as a whole, of all the players that opted out, their stock has generally fallen. some more than others. Jamar Chase by sitting out. Now Devontae Smith seems to be the number one wide receiver. Gregory Rousseau was going to be a top 5 pick. Now, he's falling into that 10 to 15 range in some mocks. Maybe he'll rise as we get closer to the draft. But we're seeing guys that opted out not faring so well, at least in the early portions of the pre-draft process. And Patrick Surtain, of course, he had a really nice season in Dallas. They desperately need help on defense all over the place. So that makes a lot of sense if he's available. But those are kind of the biggest takeaways. Another takeaway was the offensive line. This is a really strong offensive line class, and I felt McShay left a couple really good offensive linemen on the board, specifically an offensive tackle. Alex Leatherwood and Sam Cosmi, if you go and watch the tape from this year, both of them were excellent, in my opinion. I know the rise of Christian Darsaw and Rashawn Slater has kind of plummeted their draft stock a little bit. They've kind of fallen behind those guys. But I still like Cosmi and Leatherwood a lot as franchise left tackles. In most drafts, you cannot get them at the end of the first round. This is a good year. If you're at the end of the first round, you need a left tackle. This is the year to do it. And as a Steelers fan, I was very disappointed that he did not give us one of those. He gave us Najee Harris, which makes a lot of sense because the Steelers are the worst rushing offense. James Conner is a free agent. I mean, obviously the Steelers need to upgrade the running back position, but that offensive line is so bad. I don't think Franco Harris could run behind that line. Jerome Bettis couldn't run behind that line. Le'Veon Bell could not run behind this line. Not any of the best running backs. Derrick Henry, I don't think would run that well behind this offensive line. It may be a little bit better than what the Steelers currently have, but he would not be having anywhere near the same success that he is having with Tennessee. If you look at all of the running backs that are having success in the NFL right now, there are teams that have good run-blocking offensive lines. The Steelers' offensive line is just horrible right now, absolutely horrible. And with Alejandro Villanueva's contract up, Chukwuma Okorafor at right tackle, not playing that well. He started off the year nicely, but he can't run block to save his life. Marquise Pouncey's getting older on the inside. I mean, the Steelers have needs all over the offensive line. Getting a left tackle at the end of the first round makes too much sense. Alex Leatherwood or Sam Cosmi, I'd be happy with either of them as a Steelers fan. At the end of the first round, like I said, Najee Harris, he reminds me of Le'Veon Bell a lot in the way he runs with that patient running style. He's a good pass protector, which is something that I appreciate in running backs, but you can't pass up a franchise left tackle for a running back. Running backs are so easily expendable. Look at, what Jacksonville has done and stuff with James Robinson. Philip Lindsay was an undrafted free agent. A lot of the running backs in the league that are having success were late round picks. Aaron Jones was a 5th round pick, 6th round pick. I mean, yes, you do have the guys, some of the top guys like Derrick Henry, who was an early 2nd round pick. You have Josh Jacobs. I'm not saying that guys in the first round aren't better, but you don't have to have an elite running back to win. If you look at the past few teams that have won Super Bowls, when New England was winning Super Bowls, they never had an elite running back. Philadelphia, when they won, they didn't have an elite running game. They were serviceable. They had serviceable guys, and they had enough of a threat, more of a threat than what the Steelers have right now, and more of a threat. The Steelers may not have enough of a threat in the running game to be able to make a run in the playoffs. But you have to get that offensive line built up first because that's going to help both. Because there's some Steelers fans that also want to, take Kyle Trask at the end of the first round. I would hate that pick. Any quarterback that you draft behind this offensive line is going to get killed. Build the offensive line because that is going to last longer than any running back or any quarterback behind the current offensive line. That would have been the smart way to go. But for the most part, I thought it was a solid mock considering it is still early and that he did not project trades. That makes things a little bit challenging as well. But for the most part, I will give him a B-. I think that's a fair grade for this draft. There were a lot of good things about it. I just felt Slater was a little bit too high. Chris Olave is a little bit too high. A few things here and there. But for the most part, was not a bad mock. But what do you think? Put it in the comment section. Let me know what you thought of Todd McShay's mock draft. Were the points that I made valid about, if you're a Steelers fan, maybe the Steelers, or your team? Who do you want to see in the early portions? Who do you want to see your team go after? Be sure to let me know in the comment section, and be sure to stay tuned between now and April. My mock drafts, my big boards, you can always go and check them out behind thesteelcurtain.com in the fan post section. We'll be pushing, Lord willing, we'll be getting out content for you guys between now and April with a bunch of different draft related things. We'll be breaking down team needs. We'll be breaking down positions, position rankings. There's so much to get into. There's always something to talk about with the NFL draft. It's going to be a very intriguing draft. A lot of unknowns, but that's what makes it interesting. So we'll be looking forward to that. Until next time, we will see you later. Be sure to like this video, share this video on social media, and subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell icon so that you get notifications whenever a new video is out. We'll see you next time.